Tonight, a stunning tragedy. A Montreal girl killed on a summer road trip. Her father accused of murder.
Mr. Patrolman, do you have anything to say?
Police say he initially claimed the 9-year-old was kidnapped, but it wasn't true.
It was an absolute shock.
What happened along a highway in upstate New York? Trying to strike a deal, U.S. senators make a friendly visit to Canada.
Love it. Symbolize the relationship.
Yeah, Canada-U.S.
As premiers prepare for some tariffs to stay in place.
We won't get to zero on each and every topic.
As a ferocious wildfire threatens a small Newfoundland community.
What I saw was fire all around me and people panicking.
The town of Gander once again opens its doors.
From CBC News, this is The National with Paul Hunter.
Thanks for joining us. Adrian is away. A Montreal man is charged and behind bars tonight in New York State, accused of murdering his 9-year-old daughter while they were on vacation, then hiding her body. Police say Melina Fratellin was killed sometime Saturday night. Her father had reported her abducted. Now he is charged with second-degree murder and concealing a body. The horror of it all being felt deeply in Montreal, where a family is now grieving. And as our Sarah Levitt shows us from New York State, police are still hunting for answers.
Tragedy in upstate New York. What began as a father-daughter road trip from Montreal somehow turned deadly.
This is certainly a difficult case and a heartbreaking investigation.
9-year-old Melina Fratellin was found murdered, and her father, Luciano Fratellin, now accused of killing her.
The suspect has been charged with murder in the second degree and concealment of a human corpse.
Police say Luciano called 911 at 9:58 Saturday night.
His 9-year-old daughter was possibly abducted in a white van.
Luciano allegedly told police Melina had gone missing near Lake George, New York, and was possibly in danger. An Amber Alert was sent out, but the following day, Melina's body was found in Ticonderoga, more than 50 kilometers away. Now police say Luciano's account of events doesn't add up. They say surveillance cameras spotted the two of them in Saratoga Springs around 5:30 p.m. Then,
at about 6:30 p.m., she spoke to her mother on the phone and told her she and her father were en route back to Canada. The child appeared to be in good health and did not indicate she was under any duress.
Police say they found Melina's body in this pond, hidden under a log. Monday, Luciano appeared in court and pleaded not guilty.
It was an absolute shock.
His friends in Montreal find the news hard to believe.
It was an absolute surprise. There was nothing that hinted that this man could be violent or do something to his daughter in all the time that we've known him here.
Luciano is listed as owning a coffee company in Montreal. Police say he was estranged from Melina's mother and she had full custody. But they also say she knew about the trip and had no reason to believe Luciano would harm Melina.
He has no criminal history. He has no domestic violence history either.
Police say they have no reason to believe mental health played a role in this case, but they stress it's the beginning of their investigation. There's still a lot of unanswered questions. When asked about the possible cause of death, they did say they were waiting for an autopsy result.
And Sarah, what are they saying about motive in this case?
Well, police wouldn't elaborate on what they think may have led to this tragedy. On social media, Fratellin gave the appearance of a doting father. On his company website, he described Melina as the light of his life. She is the inspiration for, well, everything.
Thank you, Sarah. CBC Sarah Levitt tonight in Ticonderoga, New York. A 52-year-old federal inmate has been charged with first-degree murder in the death last year of BC serial killer Robert Pickton. He died in a Quebec prison while serving a life sentence for the murders of 6 women. He was suspected of killing many more. An investigation found Pickton was violently assaulted by a fellow prisoner with a broken broom handle. Canada's premiers are gathering in Ontario tonight, discussing how to best protect the country's economy through this U.S. trade war. As Kate McKenna shows us, they began by meeting with Indigenous leaders.
With the clock ticking down to a trade deal deadline, premiers are kicking off a 3-day summit in Ontario's cottage country.
I'm feeling fantastic. Welcome to Huntsville. What a great town. And
top of the agenda is trade and tariffs, on the heels of the Prime Minister's acknowledgement that some U.S. tariffs may be here to stay.
Exceptions, exemptions, whatever you might call them. So that is the reality, that we won't get to zero on each and every topic.
The ideal situation would be no tariffs, but like I said, if there are some, we need to have assurance that we'll keep this agreement for 3-5 years.
This crisis reshaping provincial-federal relations.
what I'm glad is that the country is united. We may differ on a few views, which is fine, but we walk out of here united.
But that unity was quickly called into question.
I was a bit disheartened, to be honest, because the things that our leadership care about, substantive things like that duty to consult, the right to free, prior, and informed consent, were not really discussed today.
Premiers met with Indigenous leaders to talk about plans to fast-track major projects, a push to bolster the economy. But some fear it could end up eroding Indigenous rights.
Balancing the need for economic participation that benefits Métis governments and their citizens, and making sure that those benefits don't come at the expense of, duty to consult.
Others struck a more optimistic tone.
Absolutely, I consider this progress. I'm glad that the premiers had agreed that we do have to have tough discussions with each other.
Premiers are pitching it as an opportunity to work together.
We think this is a great opportunity for economic reconciliation with First Nations.
One of the things being suggested is holding a First Ministers meeting that does include some Indigenous leaders.
And Kate, the Prime Minister is set to meet with the premiers next. How's that expected to go?
Well, he's expected to give them an update on how trade negotiations are going with the United States. But the premiers know that they can't control Donald Trump. Their focus has been primarily on refocusing Canada's economy to be more resilient. That means doing things like breaking down internal trade barriers and working to be less reliant on the United States for things like energy and security. But it's not all work and no play. The premiers ended the first day of the summit having dinner at Doug Ford's cottage.
Thank you, Kate. CBC's Kate McKenna tonight in Huntsville, Ontario. And before Mark Carney meets with premiers, he met today with a bipartisan group of U.S. senators on Parliament Hill. As Ashley Burke explains, they came promoting cross-border friendship and with a few requests of their own.
Can you tell us about the bracelets you're wearing?
Love it. To symbolize the relationship.
Yeah. Canada-U.S.
A Canadian token of friendship during an American trade war.
I hope very much that we can continue to be the friends that we've always been.
U.S. senators, both Democrat and Republican, met with the Prime Minister to try and mend the relationship Donald Trump hurt.
I cannot explain President Trump's rhetoric about the 51st state. I don't think that that's constructive.
But this friendly visit also comes with requests. They want to ensure Canada's digital services tax on tech giants is dead for good, and that a decades-long softwood lumber dispute is finally put to rest.
I think we now have a clear idea of how to proceed, and that's to build around some sort of quota arrangement. And the Prime Minister said he was open to that.
How was the meeting with senators?
How'd it go? It was good. Good meeting. It was good. It was a very good meeting.
The Prime Minister not saying much publicly, but last week opened the door to quotas on softwood lumber exports to the U.S.
There is normally some element of managed trade that comes out of any agreement that comes there, can include quotas.
If we could get a deal on this, it would support Americans, it would support Canadians, and it would be a net win.
But Trump's trade secretary says the White House isn't taking just any deals with countries.
Talks are moving along, but the important thing here is the quality of the deal, not the timing of the deals.
When it comes to timing, Canada is aiming to get a deal done by August 1st. Canada-U.S. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc is headed to Washington this week to try and advance talks. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
An out-of-control wildfire has forced hundreds from their homes in Newfoundland and Labrador. There are 5 active fires across the province, the biggest threatening the town of Musgrave Harbour, about 100 kilometers north of Gander. As Peter Cowan shows us, the evacuation may have been quick and chaotic, but residents are now being warmly welcomed in Gander.
Even from kilometers away, the threat was clear. So when the evacuation order came, residents of Musgrave Harbour took it seriously.
What I saw was fire all around me and people panicking, moving everything they could move.
Most moved about an hour's drive away to Gander, registering with the Red Cross. Locals got moving too.
Just another of those situations where Newfoundlanders step ahead. People just drove up and said, I have space for 3, 4 people. They can come and stay in my house.
Providing not just a warm bed, volunteers showed up to cook hundreds of hot meals.
All these are Gander residents. They're Gander people taking care of their friends and their neighbors.
September 11th, 2001.
Gander is known for stepping up in times of need.
With thousands of passengers arriving at any minute, the town is asking for help with, well, anything you can do.
Their story of feeding and housing thousands of stranded travelers during 9/11, now told around the world in the musical Come From Away.
We're all really one big extended community, and it's important to us.
As people wait, crews are attacking the fire near Musgrave Harbour. It's one of the biggest Newfoundland and Labrador has seen this year, about 1,800 hectares. But it's not the only fire the province is fighting. Further east, the Chance Harbour fire is still burning and leaving a path of destruction. This is one of dozens of cabins it's burned. A busy fire season has become too common.
It's unfortunate that I think this will continue a little bit throughout the summer. We had a dry winter, we're having a hot summer, but Newfoundlanders and Labradorians will be there for each other.
For those out of their homes, it's hard to stay positive.
I'm expecting possibly to go home to a pile of ashes.
But officials are more optimistic. Even though the fire is just 2 kilometers away from town, they don't expect it to get closer. There's rain in the forecast, hopefully enough to let these people go home. Peter Cowan, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, it's been almost a year since a massive wildfire tore through Jasper, Alberta. Today, as officials gave media a tour of the town, the mayor responded to criticism from Alberta's Premier. Danielle Smith had demanded an apology over a report into the wildfire response. Julia Wong shows us what he said.
These empty lots, a reminder of what was lost nearly 1 year ago in Jasper, Alberta, when a wildfire destroyed about a third of the town's buildings.
I do believe there's nothing we could have done. There's no amount of resources or firefighters or air tankers that could have stopped that fire.
Efforts are now underway to make sure it doesn't happen again.
We had a lot of residences that were very fire smart compliant and did a very good job of doing it.
This is exactly what we want to see.
In Jasper's backyard, Parks Canada is trying to reduce the wildfire risk.
What we've really been trying to focus on is removing things like we're seeing behind us here, the lodgepole pine.
I'm very disappointed.
But political tensions have been growing. The town commissioned a third-party report into the wildfire. It said it wasn't out to lay blame. The report found the province may have hampered the response by requesting information and trying to make decisions.
Whatever it is that they are trying to do to deflect blame, I'm not impressed with it, and I would ask for an apology from the city.
On Monday, Jasper's mayor tried to ease tensions.
There is an observation, simply an observation, that the involvement of the province made the matter more complex. A neutral statement, not a political statement.
A statement from the municipality said the report was not intended to assess the province. It took issue with media coverage, saying broader findings like recommendations were not reflected, and the statement reiterated contributions from the province. The mayor says he's not worried this friction will affect future relations.
We are not concerned with our ongoing relationship with the province, and we will expect that, as they have in the past, they will continue to support our recovery.
In a post on social media, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith thanked the town for clarifying the goal of the report and says the province remains committed to rebuilding the community. Julia Wong, CBC News, Jasper, Alberta.
To Ukraine now, Kyiv is recovering after another onslaught of Russian drones and missiles that killed 2 people and injured more than a dozen others. During the assault, a subway station being used as a bomb shelter was flooded with dust and debris. Residents emerged above ground to see damage from the nearby blast. Russia attacked with more than 400 drones and missiles overnight. Ukrainian air defenses taxed to the limit with no end in sight. Russian TV recently publishing a video of a factory mass-producing cheap long-range drones. Moscow has launched about 5,000 of them on Ukraine this month alone. Israeli troops have entered the city of Deir al-Balah. It had been a refuge for tens of thousands of Gazans. This, as Nala Ayed shows us, dozens of countries, including Canada, condemned Israel for restricting aid.
In a place where almost nowhere is safe. Deir al-Balah was safer than most, but no longer. Thousands of Palestinians, many in tents, forced to move yet again. Just as we came from the north with only our clothes, we're leaving with only our clothes, says Ahmed Abul Hussein, who had grabbed his children and left under fire overnight. It is the first time Israeli forces have launched a major offensive in this slice of Gaza, a key hub for several humanitarian agencies, and now, Israel says, a necessary target. But it may be, Israeli sources say, where Israel believes Hamas is hiding some of the remaining Israeli hostages. Their families are alarmed and issued a statement demanding answers. The people of Gaza, says the World Food Programme, have reached new levels of desperation. Dozens more Palestinians shot while trying to get food. On Sunday by Israeli soldiers who say they were only warning shots due to an immediate threat. Now, 28 foreign ministers, including Canada's, condemned the drip feeding of aid and the inhumane killing of civilians, including children.
Majesty, it's a great honor.
Prime Minister Mark Carney underlined their message in a meeting with Jordan's king.
Today, calling for an immediate ceasefire, of course, the release of all the hostages, but also the resumption at scale of humanitarian aid.
The Israeli Foreign Ministry dismissed the declaration as misguided and counterproductive. The UN says the deprivation is increasingly killing people, including 3-month-old Yahya Najjar. He was dehydrated and malnourished, says his mother. Every moment this conflict continues leaves the vulnerable even more so. Nala Ayed, CBC News, London.
And Bangladesh has just suffered its worst air disaster in recent memory when an Air Force jet plunged into a school. 19 people were killed, more than 170 injured. At the scene, panic and chaos as rescuers rushed to evacuate survivors and control the fire roaring from the gaping hole in the building. Many of the victims, children, suffering from burns and smoke inhalation. The Bangladesh military said the training jet malfunctioned shortly after takeoff. Questions continue to swirl about Donald Trump's relationship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein.
MAGA world is still very angry about the lack of releases on the Epstein files.
Is the U.S. president trying to distract his way through the crisis? Next. Plus, a concerning pattern in Canada's federal prisons. Inmates dying just before they were set to go free.
They do not have the resources that's needed for them to reintegrate.
A CBC investigation looks at why and what advocates say needs to change. And later, forced to flee home due to wildfire, a Manitoba high school class comes home to graduate.
Wow, we're all doing this. We finally did it. We got here.
The extra meaningful milestone in our moment. We're back in 2. The sudden death of The Cosby Show's Malcolm-Jamal Warner is hitting hard tonight for fans who remember the wit and charm he brought to the groundbreaking sitcom.
I was that close to one of the most embarrassing days of my life.
Warner, just 54 years old, was on a family vacation in Costa Rica, swimming in the Caribbean when an ocean current pulled him further out. He rose to fame in 1984, playing son Theo Huxtable on the show, but Warner was also a Grammy-winning musician, and his TV roles continued into this decade. Celebrities from Magic Johnson to actor Viola Davis are paying tribute and grieving the loss. The Trump administration continues to face fury over its refusal to disclose more information about convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. And as Katie Simpson explains, this is despite Donald Trump himself trying to change the conversation.
No one, especially the president, is above the law.
This is a video U.S. President Donald Trump reposted to his social media platform. It cuts to an AI-generated fake scene in the White House, showing former President Barack Obama arrested as Trump's rally song blasts. Scroll through Trump's feed lately, and there's plenty of controversial and divisive content just like it.
All these sort of provocative statements that are designed to get people talking about literally anything other than Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein.
Trump has been unable to silence questions about his personal relationship with Jeffrey Epstein and failed to explain why his administration has not released more documents about the criminal investigation into the convicted sex offender.
If the Department of Justice and the FBI want to move forward with releasing any further credible evidence, they should do so.
The backlash is strongest within Trump's base after he and allies peddled Epstein conspiracies for political gain.
MAGA world is still very angry about the lack of releases on the Epstein files.
This political scientist says Trump's erratic online presence is to be expected.
Well, he's a master of distraction and deflection. And what he's learned is that most of us don't have a long attention span.
And as long as this issue persists, it's likely controversial posts will continue.
You know, I think this second term, we're seeing Trump completely unchained. I think there are very few people in this White House, in this administration, who are willing to say, wow, that was just a step too far, sir. You might want to take that down.
Trump is now getting cover from powerful Republicans. House Speaker Mike Johnson is shutting down an effort to hold a symbolic vote on releasing more Epstein files. Had it passed, it would put more pressure on Trump. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
Why are so many federal prison inmates dying during the final stretch of their sentence?
I felt like he was robbed of his life, and there wasn't anything that I could do.
How CBC obtained the data that wasn't meant to be made public. That's next. Plus, Canada's Prime Minister says he's followed the ethics rules around financial assets, but his critics claim his holdings are rife with conflicts of interest.
How can he possibly be involved in developing a budget when all the tax policies could impact on his investments directly?
Andrew Chang digs into why Mark Carney's corporate connections may or may not pose a problem when The National breaks down the stories shaping your world next. CBC News has exclusive data that you were not supposed to see when we requested information on the death rate of federal inmates. The Correctional Service acknowledges it shared the unredacted figures by accident. Thomas Daig shows us the concerns they raise.
Ashley Fontaine's brother spent most of his life in custody. After a string of violent crimes and mental health struggles, Kendall Lee Campo told his sister he wanted to turn his life around. He never could.
A lot of those places that he did go to were supposed to stabilize his behaviors.
Campo overdosed on methadone at age 31, less than 2 years before his expected release. His case is one among many. Federal inmates dying not long before they're set to walk free.
I felt like he was robbed of his life, and there wasn't anything that I could do.
Data obtained by CBC News shows from 2019 onward, Correctional Service Canada recorded 136 deaths deemed non-natural, mostly suicides and overdoses. What's more, the agency has failed to curb such deaths, with the rate remaining stable year after year. All of it, say advocates, highlighting an urgent need for better support in those crucial final months.
There needs to be, both for provincial sentences and federal sentences, people in the jails who help them plan for release, and those really don't exist right now.
Richard Miller served time in federal custody himself and says it can prove a dangerous cycle.
Guys are in prison and they're doing time. They do not have the resources that's needed for them to reintegrate.
Ashley Fontaine remains haunted by her brother's death and by these words.
All he ever said to me about his experience in jail is that you never want to go there.
Correctional Service Canada declined our interview request. A spokesperson said every death in custody is investigated and that staff are committed to learning from each incident. Thomas Dagg, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, now it's time to break down the stories shaping our world. Inside the Prime Minister's portfolio, what's the bottom line on potential conflict of interest?
I don't know what's in it. Yeah, let's talk about that.
From scattered shares in hundreds of companies to some very specific holdings.
Brookfield is invested in modular homes. Brookfield is invested in heat pumps.
What stands in the way of self-interest? Andrew Chang, host of CBC's About That, takes a deep and thorough look at Mark Carney's wealth and his power to make it grow.
Well, for months, it's been bubbling.
Mark Carney has failed to come clean with Canadians about his financial interests and his conflicts of interest.
I own nothing but cash and personal real estate.
And now it has blown up.
Well, it turns out, while he said that,
I own nothing.
He knowingly owned 574 stocks.
The world is just now getting a closer look at the financial disclosures of Canada's Prime Minister. And while Mark Carney insists he has followed all of the rules, the opposition is accusing him of having lied about his financial interests since before he was even elected.
And this will put him in an impossible position where he will be conflicted at every turn.
So let's explore Mark Carney's money, where it's invested, and how much of what both sides claim about it is actually true. Okay, so the first thing I wondered is, where does this 574 number come from?
He knowingly owned 574 stocks and deferred profits and stock options in Brookfield and other companies.
Well, here's a list of every stock Mark Carney disclosed, held in an investment account, managed by a third party, and now in a blind trust. Big name companies everyone would recognize: Airbnb, Alphabet, that's Google, Amazon, American Express, and those are just the A's. From Best Buy all the way to Walmart, Walt Disney, Warner Brothers, and beyond. There are 567 individual stocks in this part of Carney's portfolio.
Pierre Poilievre is trying to make the case that Mark Carney's investments are broad, his business history is broad, and he is trying to suggest that that means that the Prime Minister is compromised. He's trying to suggest a maximum number of potential conflicts for the Prime Minister.
But keep a couple things in mind. First, and this is something pointed out by the Ethics Commissioner, Carney had no control over the selection of these investments. They're part of a managed investment account where someone is effectively paid to pick the individual stocks so that the investor doesn't have to. And this is really common. Hedge funds, mutual funds, exchange-traded funds, they're how a typical passive investor goes about diversifying into many stocks. You hand over your money so that somebody can buy you a bit of everything. And that's actually why they tend to work so well, because so many people tend to pool their investment dollars to do this very thing, which gives them a stake in hundreds, if not thousands, of individual companies. That's how pension funds work. Now, just because investing indirectly with these massive, well-known companies is common, doesn't mean there's no conflict.
I mean, Carney's is filled with massive blue chip stocks, so he knows what's going in. He knows what's in there. He has a good sense of the economy. He knows what's profitable.
But most experts seem to agree. It's not these 567 stocks that are Carney's biggest problem, because for one, like I said, they're in a blind trust, which I'll explain in a moment. But there's another much smaller group of stocks and one very particular set of stock options that may represent the largest conflict of interest.
Just on your personal assets, do you have any, in Stripe and Brookfield, do you have any equity stock options or anticipate any future payments from either two of those companies?
So the first thing to say with respect to my personal assets is I have complied with all of the rules.
So when you're looking at the list of stocks Carney disclosed to Canada's Ethics Commissioner, arguably the most important page is the very first one, because that's where you'll find 8 distinct sets of investments where Carney has a more direct connection. Take Stripe, for example, the payment processor. Carney's a former board member. Watershed Technology, they help companies track their carbon emissions. They were founded by people who used to work at Stripe, and Carney was on a board of advisors there, contributing to their work in a few ways, as you can see here in this conversation with the company's co-founder.
How does a banker end up obsessed about climate change? What was your journey here?
Appropriately focused on climate change. Maybe I'll just amend the question.
And Brookfield Asset Management, a $1 trillion investment firm. Before entering politics, Carney was the board chair. And part of what he earned during his time at Brookfield was a whole bunch of stock options. Now, stock options are just a promise from a company to let you buy a certain number of shares at a locked-in price. So let's say I hold options to buy 100 shares at $10 each. Doing the math, that would be $1,000 worth of shares that I'm allowed to buy at that price within a certain time frame. But I don't buy now. I decide to keep holding those options. And 5 years later, the company's doing pretty well. And the stock price, let's say, goes up to $20 a share. Now I've got a pretty good play because I can exercise my option, buying 100 of those shares at the old price of $10. And then if I turn right around and sell those shares at today's market value, I've just made a neat $1,000 profit.
To some extent, it's the most valuable property that a shareholder has, because it's not just the present shares that he or she may have, but the ability to actually exercise future purchases, etc., which could be dramatically higher in value.
So here's the regulatory disclosure showing Carney's stock options in Brookfield. 2 sets of options, more than 400,000 of them in total, giving him the right to buy company stock at about $35 and $40 a share. The profit he could make if he did exactly what we just did in our earlier example, buying low and then immediately selling high, just over $6.8 million US. And actually, that's the expected profit given where the share price was at the end of 2024. Now, we're 6 months later, and the price has actually gone up. So today, you turn those options around, you'd profit more like $8 million US. Either way, you start to see why Carney's critics believe this is a problem.
He has announced he's going to spend billions of dollars on modular homes. Brookfield is invested in modular homes. He says he wants to subsidize heat pumps. Brookfield is invested in heat pumps.
So part of the screen in place is that he should be shielded from making decisions that impact Brookfield-owned companies. Because in impacting Brookfield-owned companies, he impacts Brookfield's bottom line, which then impacts their share value, which impacts his option value, right?
So how has Carney addressed these concerns? Well, he's basically closed his eyes and pushed all of his investments to a trustee.
The blind trust is a trust that's administered by someone who's at arm's length to him, so not known to him, not a friend, not a former business associate, and approved by the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner.
So in a nutshell, Carney would still own everything that he used to own, but someone else controls it, makes all the decisions, buy, sell, hold. And most importantly, Carney's not allowed to know what any of those decisions are.
It's in the hands of somebody else, and you will not be able in any way, shape, or form have to interact with that.
So what I have is cash, personal real estate, and they're assets that were, all those assets were divested into a blind trust, which is managed by a trustee. And it literally means exactly what it says. I don't know what's in it.
But yeah, let's talk about that. Because while it's technically true, he ceases to know what's in his portfolio once he hands it over. It's incredibly misleading because he knows.
I would imagine if you're hiring someone to manage your assets and your assets are performing well, you would expect that they wouldn't liquidate them, that they'd hold on to them.
Right. There's no reason for his trustee to wake up tomorrow morning and just beep, beep, boop, 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 decide to sell all of his shares in Lululemon. Why would he do that?
So I would imagine that there's some stuff in his portfolio that he's fairly confident would be there forever.
But right now, Mr. Carney is clearly not blind of what he holds, because even we know what he holds.
And Carney understands this. So there's another measure in place to shield him from conflicts of interest, and that is an ethics screen.
The simplest way to think about it is it's like a little bit of a flag that goes up. Maybe we could call it a red flag, where if a company that is listed under the ethics screen comes up in the course of conversation in the Prime Minister's work, everybody's supposed to take a beat and say, okay, can the Prime Minister continue to be involved in this conversation?
So basically, Carney has tasked two people, his chief of staff and the clerk of the Privy Council, to run informational interference. Catch any file working its way up to the Prime Minister's office that has been flagged as a potential conflict and divert it to someone else. Which companies fall under this screen? Well, certainly anything to do with Brookfield and its many partnerships and affiliates. But there are more, 20 more, because, Carney says, I had a management position or an oversight role in respect of their investing activities. There are 4 on top of that included in the screen because they're registered as lobbyists. Then add another 73 companies out of an abundance of caution because they're Brookfield related, even though I had no role in managing them and no direct financial interest in them.
What's novel about the screens that are in place for Prime Minister Carney is that the breadth and the scale of the number of companies and the industries that they would cover is huge, which means I think the average person looking in would say, is it possible for Carney to govern at all if he can't have make decisions or engage in public dialogue about these industries?
And this is where things get tricky, because under existing conflict of interest rules, if the government wanted to do something really ridiculous, like make August 1st Brookfield Day, a national holiday, Mark Carney would have to recuse himself from that decision and everything around it. But if the government is making a change to, I don't know, the capital gains tax, which does affect Brookfield, but not really in a fundamentally different way than it affects lots of people, that's okay. So what happens in the middle? If there's a policy that the government is contemplating that affects lots of people, but maybe affects Brookfield more, what should Carney do then? Well, he and the ethics commissioner agree that should be screened. And that's an extra layer we don't generally see.
These are 2 of the most powerful individuals in our government with access to a lot of resources. The clerk of the Privy Council is the head of the Federal Public Service and has the ability to draw on almost any part of the public service to assist in that.
But it also means that those 2 individuals who are in charge of the screen have to identify the companies, identify the industries, and then do a calculation about proportionality before making a decision about what crosses the Prime Minister's desk. That's a lot of gatekeeping, and I don't know how that's going to be operationalized.
And coming up, a question of trust. How do Carney and his team cope with all of these conflicts while maintaining the trust of Canadians?
Mark Carney's investments make him a target for accusations.
This isn't about the environment. This is about the bottom line for Brookfield.
Safeguards, like a blind trust, can only do so much.
You're not going to get 0 conflicts here.
So what's the real risk? Andrew Chang, the host of CBC's About That, arrives at some helpful conclusions.
The thing about trust is that it's really easy to undermine.
Just to be clear then, going forward, you have no potential equity stake, no potential stock options, or any other potential future payments that you currently anticipate could come from either Strike or Brookfield.
So what I have is cash, personal real estate, and they're assets that all those assets were divested into a blind trust, which is managed by a trustee.
This is one of those questions that voters, I think, tend to wish politicians would answer a little more straightforwardly, as in, yes, I continue to hold stock options for Brookfield, but here's what I've done to mitigate any potential conflicts. That's a straighter answer than saying, instead, well, let me answer your question this way. And while that may be a small thing, Carney's critics think there are lots of small things. Like when Carney name drops a company such as Westinghouse, as he did in the French leaders' debate.
Nous avons des grandes sociétés nucléaires, y compris Gander, Westinghouse et puis de Cameco.
Which might be a problem because Carney likes nuclear power. Westinghouse builds nuclear reactors, and Brookfield acquired a controlling interest in Westinghouse in 2023. Does that mean Carney acted improperly? No, not necessarily. But it's not just that either. For example, how do you avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest when, on the one hand, you've repeatedly promised to transform Canada into a clean energy superpower?
Canada has a unique opportunity to become an energy superpower.
But then you also hold a financial stake in an investment firm where you co-led efforts to raise capital for 2 major clean energy funds.
So my approach to public life, and I've been in public life for more than 2 decades, is to meet all the standards and surpass the standards with the highest integrity.
So yes, there are issues. But here's the other side of the coin. You remember when I said trust is really easy to undermine? I also mean that in the sense that it's just really easy to undermine, whether or not there are any supporting facts.
This Liberal government is doubling down on its insane ban on gas-powered vehicles. Isn't it true that this isn't about the environment, this is about the bottom line for Brookfield?
Given the breadth of his assets, there's going to be conflicts. You're not going to get 0 conflicts here. I have no belief that that's even a possibility. What we need to see is how does he mitigate those conflicts so that he doesn't put himself in a position, to make a decision that benefits his own portfolio or that looks like he's benefiting himself.
So what's the solution? Well, the opposition leader put forward this week one concrete demand, that Carney should go further than simply placing his existing portfolio into a blind trust. He thinks he should start all over.
We're calling on the Prime Minister to sell his investments, turn them into cash, hand them to a trustee who can invest them in a way that is completely blind to him, so that he does not have any knowledge of what he owns. That is the spirit of a blind trust. A blind trust is meant to be something that the owner does not know anything about. That's what it means to be blind of the assets.
But there's no indication Carney's willing to do this. So here's where we're at. Has Mark Carney followed all the rules? Yes. Does having outside financial interests make him incapable of governing? No. But will Carney's tenure be complicated by those interests? Yes. We should remember Carney's financial disclosures are evidence that part of the system to avoid conflicts of interest works. But sitting prime ministers also don't usually have ethical screens hindering them from making decisions affecting more than 100 companies across multiple sectors. Right now, we don't know how effectively his government will manage those conflicts, but we'll certainly learn over time.
When holdings go into a blind trust, the trustee becomes their legal owner. So when Carney said he owns nothing but cash and real estate, it is true. But that likely won't satisfy everyone. Still ahead, weeks after fleeing a forest fire, some high school students in Manitoba finally get their diplomas. Our moment is up next. You're looking at Flin Flon's graduating class of 2025, lined up nearly 2 months after they were forced to flee town due to out-of-control wildfires in Manitoba. Up until a few weeks ago, they weren't even sure of the possibility, but tonight, this Flin Flon grad class and the community that came back together make our moment.
We had to flee Flin Flon in the giant convoy that was like bumper to bumper. My mom, she did not stop working on my grad dress. Like even on the road, she would just like continue adding all the little things. And we even had to like scour so many like Walmarts and craft stores just to get like 1 bottle of glitter paint.
It was kind of heartbreaking, but then when we came back, everything was all right. And we got our stuff planned. It was amazing. It felt amazing.
Wow, we're all doing this. We finally did it. We got here. Yeah. After the month that we had and the month that we lost.
This is the same group that missed their grade 8 ceremonies because of the pandemic. When it came to a chance of losing it again, I knew we wanted to give them something.
Glad that we're all still here, you know. Glad we are stronger than ever as a community and celebrating this special day for us.
Oh man, what do you say after that, right? What perseverance, what resolve, what gratitude, what lessons for all of us from those students, their parents, and their teachers. For all of us here at the National, thank you for being with us. You can watch anywhere, anytime on the free CBC News app and subscribe to the National's YouTube channel. I'm Paul Hunter. Take care.